So hello everyone, and yes, rigging and animating a G-Splat centipede in Houdini 22. So the main motivation behind doing this was to show off the fact that we can render G-Splats in the viewport directly, and because we can do that, it means that all the kinds of things that we want to interact with interactively are now possible, and that includes rigging and animation. So we've just had some really great talks on G-Splats. So this is going to feel a lot like finger painting because I'd never touched them before. Fortunately, I didn't really need to because it really was very straightforward to bring that in via the baked G-Splat SOP. And then I've got a point cloud, and I've got points with attributes, so I'm happy, I'm comfortable. The bone deform SOP just works. And all the other SOPs just work, like the transform SOP. Bit closer. Oh, sorry. I was quiet. It's happened again. Start again. Dear God. Where was I? Oh yeah, the transform SOP. So that just works almost, and this is when I begin my little Debbie Downer segment, where I'm just full of problems. So the first thing that I needed to do when I got the model in was scale it. And so I plugged in the transform SOP, and I scaled it down, but all the points got close together, but everything just turned into a big mush. And people that know more than me about this stuff, which is possibly everybody, will know why that's happened. And so in Houdini, if you don't know, attributes can have type information attached to them. And the scale attribute that gets put out by the baked G-Splat SOP is just 3 floats, not a vector. And so it won't get transformed by any operations. And so I'm scratching my head going, why? What are they up to? This seems like a bit of a glaring bug. And I was going to find out why very shortly. So I cast the scale attribute to a vector, and suddenly it all works. Everything's scaling absolutely fine. And then I go to rotate the model, and everything starts to get real weird, and I'm seeing all these streaks and all those ellipsoids that we've heard about before were starting to strafe across. And of course, what was happening is that the non-uniform scale was being rotated as well as the orient attribute. So that is why scale is a 3 float and not a vector. This does bring up things for the future, and fortunately for this example, I could punt on it and not worry about it. So I have no idea how a squash and stretch rig would work. So if my joints are non-uniformly, like I said, I didn't have to think about it, and I'm still not. But anyway, after casting back to a 3 float, then I could rotate the model and everything was happy. So, and this is where I try to get a slide working. Oh yeah, can use a touchpad. So this was the model that we were working with, provided by Danny Vittel, who does some great work on Supersplat AT, and he does a lot of macro G-Splat stuff. And so the one we went to work with was this centipede here, which seems to have been popular in some quarters, not so much in others. And this model was in no way what we would expect to be ready for rigging and animation, right? So there's no symmetry. This is not a rest pose. Yeah. So something needed to be done about that. The next little problem that came along was I didn't quite realize before just how much we rely on topology. You know, I'm a character guy. I'm a rigging guy. I point clouds and volumetric things that somebody else's jive. And so, yeah, weight painting, joint placement even, not having surfaces to snap to or intersect to, this was all stuff that got really, really hard when it's just a cloud of points. Now, obviously, having listened to the other talks, and if you've trained a G-Splat off a model, there very well will be techniques for using the original topology to get around these problems. But for me, this was just from photographs, and I only had the point cloud. Yeah, viewport selections, other things that we rely on Topology for just day to day. They were all swept out from underneath me. So doing it as is was starting to look really, yeah, quite prohibitive. Now, there are other things about, I don't think that's going to loop. But anyway, what I tried to show was that, it's not. What I was trying to show there was just the way that G-Splats interact with each other. And like I said, this is new territory for me. I've never worked like this. And observing just how, and I think somebody else mentioned the word painterly to do with, yes, effects in G-Splats. And that's just how it felt to me. The effect of moving things apart and closer together and just how they interact with each other as they overlap was actually incredibly immediate and very refreshing. You know, I'm sitting there going, what about my edge loops? What about my volume preservation? What about my, you know, all of this stuff just went, and suddenly I had something really immediate to work with, and it started to feel real good. So we still had that rest pose problem. And the idea occurred to me with the way that they interact with each other, maybe Danny wouldn't mind if we pursued a different path and actually kit bashed together a new centipede using the original as a source. Fortunately, Danny agreed to let us butcher his work, and that's how we went forward. At this point, Danny actually went away and did a V2 for us, a version 2 of the G-Splat, and I was able to go away and have a think about how centipedes move, loop, and play. And looking this up, they have, and I really like this phrase, the metacronal wave gait of many-legged creatures, normally insects. I'm going to make so many entomological mistakes, so if there's anybody in here that's into that stuff, I apologize. But this describes the wave-like propagation of the footfall pattern in most species from back to front, in some from front to back, but I went back to front. Again, I might have got that wrong. And I went away and just figured out how that works based off a phase. So what you're seeing is something that's driven off a wheel-like animation. For the first 180 degrees, the leg is lifted and translated forward. For the next 180 degrees, it's just translated backwards. So it's really quite simple. And whilst I'm R&Ding this, I've also got this lingering thing in the back of my mind. Is, oh God, sliding, foot sliding, not again. And there's a lot of feet. And basically, so one of the things that I love, and it's probably the hardest thing to let go of once you've started rigging stuff in Houdini, is to let go of the ability to put stuff off. Anyway, never do today what you can put off till tomorrow. And I could leave it with this simple prototype. It definitely looks right. And I can leave it there and worry about, get to the finished result first, and then come back and revise that if I need to. As it turned out, when I look back at the reference for centipedes, they do have a very skittering quality to the motion. It's one of the things that I think makes them unnerving. And there is a lot of sliding in the legs. There's so little weight in each one. And it's a lot more like watching something moving through water than it is moving on land. So in the end, it actually added something, thankfully. Okay, yeah, and this is where that bit of R&D ended up. So at this point, I figured out how to get a change in distance traveled onto that phase to drive the leg motion. After getting that far, Danny came back with the V2 and we were ready to make a start. And basically what I was doing is just isolating segments that were cleanish, that I thought could be used, and so I picked a couple of narrow ones, a couple of broad ones, and just rigged them as they were. And one of the things that's always been nice about KineFX is that you can do an intermediate bone deformation as part of the setup, as long as you don't delete the capture attributes. So So yeah, very, very simple KineFX-like setup. Using the capture proximity, which I haven't touched in ages because it's definitely not the most robust capture method we have available to us in Houdini, but again, without topology, this is what I had to work with. And as it was, it worked pretty well. So having done that with a few of the segments, I was then ready to assemble them using a copy-to-point setup. The only things of note here, it's all pretty standard, figuring out how to place the template points based upon the width of the segment coming in. And then, of course, because I'm generating new skin geometry, new joints, I had to do some manual wrangling of the capture data. And no, I am going to do this shout out. The fact that we no longer need the 20 float array pcap data detail attribute is a major feature of Houdini 22, and I won't be told otherwise. It makes doing this stuff a lot easier. So yeah, that was that. And at the end of that setup, I've now got everything I need for the bone deform. So this was at the point again where I go on to the rig build. I haven't even finished yet. I haven't finished my skinning or any of that stuff, but I've got enough to test the animation that I want to put onto it. So I want to get there as quickly as possible so I can work out how much sleep I need to lose. And this SOP network stayed pretty much the same. I just put my placeholders in for what I wanted to do, changed the scripts, but like I said, the broad structure stayed the same. So after I've got all those IK solvers added to the legs, I've got the spline IK for the body, I'm ready to think about getting the procedural animation onto the character. And there's two ways that you can do this. If you're going fully procedural, I can pretty much stop there and just invoke the rig directly, take the result of that Metacronal wave, build a parameter dictionary, invoke the rig. And that's it. But of course, if you want to make use of everything that's in the animate state and add some hand animated layers to this for the antenna, the head, the tail, we need to do a couple of extra bits. And this is when I gathered all the bits up, pack them up into the format that the animate state wants. So just into the pack folder sub, add that character to the scene, and we've now got something that's ready for the animate state. Except we're not quite, because we've got this procedural animation. So I build the parameter dictionary, feed that into a motion clip, which gives us a dictionary per frame. Feed that into the channel primitives from motion clip, which now gives us a bunch of animation curves on the geometry, which we can inject via Apex scene add animation. Then I'm ready to plug that into the animate state, and after I've got what I wanted out, invoke it for the skin, the skeleton, or whatever else you want to fetch. So the last little thing that I wanted to focus on a little bit was the antenna. And this is probably one of my favorite things about working with SOP-based rigging is reusability and composition. So placing joints for spline IK, in an ideal world, we want to use the spline that we're going to use to drive the IK to place the joints. But this can be quite limiting sometimes. Fortunately, with this kind of picture, so this is way upstream in the network before I've done any capturing of the antenna. I want to build the skeleton using the rig. And then I can pass that chunk of rig down the network, fuse it into the rest of it, and I know that everything's going to match up one-to-one. So it's yeah, just, I was going to say helps you stay sane, but I'm probably the wrong person to say that. And so what I'm able to do is invoke that chunk of rig logic straight away, send that on to capture, and like I said, pass the rest of it on down to be merged with the rest of the rig. I'll just play it, you dumb. Right, there we go. So what I end up with is something, a kind of quasi-viewport tool, where I can just use the rig pose to position the CVs, check the output of my capture as I go, and everything else just works. And that's about it. So this is the network for the whole thing. Looks a little bit big and scary at first, but actually all of the green boxes, that's purely geometry processing. So that's the model. The little pink bit in the middle, that's the rig build. So it's the actual rigging part was incredibly small. And then the yellow was the animation. So there we go. And I'll see whether this video loads. It does. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Henry. Are there any questions? Play it again.
It was on the... Watch the sneak peek. It's on there. It is up here somewhere. Da, 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 da. I think this is the last part of it. There we go. So just that kind of thing. Sorry, this was I did this for Fiona. It was
Don't blame
meant to
me.
be I'm blaming you. Yeah, it was meant to be edited. So. Oh, that was the end of that. Wasn't the whole thing. Sorry.
Can anyone say how Henry captured the kit bash bits? Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh. This is for the plushie, by the way.
Yes.
If there are no more questions, then...
Oh. Might be one up there.
Just blind.
Hi. My question was, how easily can this be adapted to crowd simulations or irregular terrains for automatic walk cycles and stuff like this?
So that brings us back to foot planting. So this particular example, and because there was an animation of it walking around a log as well, didn't need really close scrutiny on the placement. So if there was something that was a very high frequency, uneven terrain, then I would certainly want to do another pass on the procedural animation to get that to look better. So as is, it would depend on the shot. But for something, like I said, more scrutiny, it would need additional work. But fortunately, nothing else needs to be changed. It's purely that bit that was on the right-hand side. Will this work? Of course it won't. Don't be stupid. Oh, yeah. Oh, hang on. Yeah, so it's basically what's north of the yellow bit. That's the only bit that needs to be changed on that, because that's the animation solver. Does that answer your question at all?
I guess.
With confidence.
Thank you.
Danny, who provided both G-Splats of this centipede, has agreed to allow us to distribute that for everyone to download. So later on, when 22 comes out, we will have this, amongst others, in the content library on sidefx.com. I think that's it. Otherwise, thanks, Henry.